Welcome to In the News for August 15th, 2025. I am Brett Burney from appsandlaw.com.
And this is Jeff Richardson from iPhone JD. Good morning, Brett.
Good morning, Jeff. I am coming to you live from National Harbor. Well, it's National Harbor, Maryland. It's actually in D.C. I am looking at a huge Ferris wheel outside of my window. I'm in D.C. for the ILTA conference, the International Legal Technology Association, and just ended yesterday. It's been great. And it's just great to see a lot of old friends talk about legal technology.
Hey, Brett, when you were at ILTA, did
Yeah.
anybody mention the letters AI? Just out of curiosity.
Well, it came up a couple of times. And you couldn't even get in the door without AI slapping you in the face from some sign or flashing screen. It's been a little nuts, Jeff, I got to tell you. We want to say thank you to our sponsor, Lit Software. We have enjoyed having them on board. I didn't get to see Lit Software, but I got to tell you, I talked to a lot of folks at the ILTA conference this past year about Lit Software and the apps like TrialPad and TranscriptPad, people talking about it. And of course, Lit Software, talking about AI. One of the things I know we've talked about before with TranscriptPad that they use AI to transcribe, video stuff. So anyway, we'll come back and talk a little bit about that. But we are in the midst of what I call it's like Apple anticipation for these next few weeks here, Jeff, right? I mean, we talked about this a little bit last week, and we expect and anticipate that maybe in about 3 weeks or so, we haven't got an official announcement that Apple will have some kind of a keynote address, a presentation of some kind, and hopefully announce several products. And the speculation has already begun.
Indeed. So, just by the way, it was typically Apple announces the date for the iPhone introduction in like that last week of August.
Last week, right? Right.
So we're still about 2 weeks away from the announcement, but from the announcement of the announcement, so to speak. As we discussed before, I think it's going to be September 9th. But regardless, we're now getting close enough that not really, well, normally I would say Apple doesn't announce anything new this time of year. Of course, that did happen this week. We're going to talk about that in a second with the blood oxygen sensor. But people were getting close enough that rumors are coming out. There was an interesting thing this week of leaks from Apple itself, because if I understand this correctly, when Apple is releasing its beta software, typically the software is going to have to have some understanding of what device it's running on. And Apple usually tries to hide that. But this week they released something that apparently had revealed some of the specific devices that don't currently exist, which led people to say, oh, okay, so we actually know some things like, a new HomePod, a new Apple TV, stuff like that. Again, it's still, it sort of crosses between rumor to sort of a self-own leak, as it were. But we're getting close enough to sort of get, so, the speculation and the leaks, and you put it all together and the anticipation, of course. And we have a lot of people talking about what is coming out. One thing that I thought was interesting was, actually, let me start with Joe Rossignol of MacRumors talking about the new, the biggest selling device, of course, that Apple has is the iPhone. Everything else pales in comparison.
Of course.
And so I'm always intrigued by the iPhone Pro, not only because I use that model, you do too, but because this is like, the best selling device, the top one. This is where Apple's going to put a lot of its efforts to really try to wow us. So, and they do such a good job every year. You're like, what is next? And so Joe has some theories. I don't know how much of this is him speculating and how much is based on rumors. I think it's a little bit of both. But, the big ones he talks about was an increase in RAM, which doesn't necessarily, nobody really knows how much RAM you typically have in an iPhone. But the reason that really matters is more RAM means they can do more on device at once, which of course, yes, it means you can have more tabs open in Safari. For a lot of people, that's important. But I think the real reason that Apple would spend more money on RAM is so that you could have even more on device. What are those two letters again? You guessed it, AI. And so this will be hopefully making that better. Another one that was interesting to me is they say that, one of the reasons I love my Pro model is because of these cameras on it. And I love the fact that I can get up to a 5x optical zoom, because there are lots of times where I want to take a picture and I want to zoom in a little bit, right? And so the rumor is that it's going to go up to an 8x optical zoom.
Oh boy.
Which I would actually like. I mean, the more zoom you have, the more you have to hold your camera really still, of course. But but I would love to have that power. Android phones, many models have had better zooms for a while now. Some I think up to 10x. And then of course you have I didn't link to this because it has nothing to do with iPhone, Brett, but there was another story this week. I'm sure you've heard about this. For years now, Samsung has been sort of fudging a little bit. Whenever you take a photo that has the moon in it, Samsung, instead of, it's hard to photograph the moon because it's so bright against a dark sky, especially with something like an
Sure.
iPhone or an Android. And so Samsung has had this thing that when you take any picture with the moon, it basically replaces whatever picture you actually
What?
took with its AI version of a moon. So it's like, it's not a picture. It's basically, I mean, it's more sophisticated than this, but it's basically cutting and pasting. And somebody did a test this week where they had a picture on their computer of a blurry moon. So like the actual picture on their computer was blurry. They took a picture of it with their Samsung phone, and the picture was perfect.
Oh
It's
my
like, I didn't do
goodness.
that. It's just proving
Oh
that it's
my
not really
goodness.
reality, it's recreating. But anyway, so Apple is not doing that. But with a better zoom,
I
whether you're
hope
taking a
not.
picture of the moon or something else, that would be nice. And some other improvements too. So I thought that was one thing that was interesting from this week. Um, what else?
Indeed.
Yeah, another
Yeah, you
thing
mentioned
was
this anti-reflective display. I don't know if I need that on a phone necessarily, but I know that some people do need it and do appreciate that. So that's interesting there.
I have never purchased an iPad, and they may actually have it with the Macs now. I can't. Yeah, they do with the
They
nano
do. Yes.
texture
That's
anti-reflective
right.
glass. But I will
Mm-hmm.
tell you, anytime I talk to somebody who spends the extra money, it's usually like an extra $100 or something. They all rave to me. And like I've had so many people say that they love it that I have to admit it does make me think, gosh, do I need this? And I'm sitting here looking at my iPad right now and I can sort of see the reflection of my overhead lights, on top of me in my office. It doesn't really bother me. I suppose if you're outside with the bright sun, it's a bigger deal, but I don't use my iPad outside that much. And so an iPhone that had a more anti-reflective display, I mean, I'm not opposed to it because people love it so much. So that would be interesting. And again, maybe it'll be an option that you have to pay more for. I don't know. Interesting.
I remember this guy. We talked about this. You remember you posted about this commercial. Do you remember
Oh
this?
yeah.
The guy, the bronze guy. I'm like, okay, if you're gonna be sitting in the sun like this, and like to your point, I've heard the same thing from folks that have got that anti-reflective. I feel like I just never needed it. I don't know if I'm just a traditionalist. Like I think a computer screen should be reflective, but again, I've never sat in front of an anti-reflective or that nano texture yet. So that'll be interesting to see.
Jason Snell had an interesting article this week for Macworld that I linked to the 6 colors version of it, but he talks about
Yes.
how historically Apple will come out with a product, and it's just one. They had just one iPod initially, just one iPhone, just one everything. And then over time, Apple will sort of branch out and have different versions being sold at the same time, not just improvements to the product, but different lines. So we currently have like the cheaper iPhone and the more expensive Pro. We have the smaller iPhone and then
Right.
the bigger, either the Plus or the Max model. And so he was talking about how there's different ways that Apple has done this over the years. And I think what he's alluding to is the rumors that you and I have talked about a couple times in the past that this year Apple will have a thinner version of the iPhone. At the same time, it continues to sell the
Mm-hmm.
version that we all know and love. And that this is paving the way for next year for Apple to have an iPhone that sort of folds open like a book and that you could have something about the
Yeah.
same size screen of a mini. And I'll tell you, earlier this week, I actually looked at a video that was linked to, but I didn't put this in my post, but I think John Gruber linked to it on Daring Fireball. There's a guy, really smart guy named Dieter Bohn that for years worked for the Verge, and he is now in-house at Google. But he did a little video talking about these new Samsung Z Fold phones that open up. And when he was showing it off in his video, I have to admit, I sort of I get it. I'm going to be really intrigued if Apple does come up with a folding iPhone. This is not 2025. This would be 2026
Sure.
supposedly. Um, it's an intriguing product. So anyway, it was, this is sort of a nice post by Jason because it talks about, historically we see Apple branch out and presumably we could see some of that this fall, most notably with the iPhone, but perhaps with other products as well.
Yeah, he talks about the Apple Watch in here a little bit as well. And
Yeah.
I mean, he even had this picture down here, which I thought was interesting. There's so many people that have been clamoring. Well, there's been a group of people that have been clamoring. It's like, we want a round Apple Watch as opposed to sort of
Yeah.
like
I'm very
the square
curious.
that we have. And I don't know that if I need that or not. I kind of like that screen, to fill it up. I mean, obviously, I still
Right.
use that modular, watch face for the Ultra that I have. And I just love it because I love packing as much information in there. And it's so easy
Yeah.
to swipe to a less busy face if I need to, depending on what mood strikes me at the time. But I just thought this is great from hearing about Jason talking about, well, what they can do with the Apple Watch next. And that will be interesting.
Round is always, like you say, some people say they really like it. And when it comes to just a traditional watch face with a hand that sweeps, round makes perfect sense. It's
Sure.
great. But when you want to display text or words or complications, the square makes more sense. And for
Right.
me, I never really have an analog watch. The only time I do it is, this is totally silly because nobody notices but me. But sometimes if I'm like more dressed up, if I'm wearing a suit to court or going to a fancy
Oh
party,
yeah.
I will switch from my regular watch face, which has digital numbers, over to one that has the analog because in my mind I'm a little bit more fancy. Does anybody in the world notice this but me? I'm sure not. But regardless,
But it
but I
makes
so
you
I
feel better.
it makes me feel better that I've got my fancy analog. So anyway, but so I don't know that I would be interested in a round Apple Watch, but Apple will. And the thing that always interests me about the Apple Watch, Brett, Apple had its financial results, was it a week or two ago? Their quarterly
Right.
results. And one of the things they talk about is how many people were buying their first iPhone, their first iPad, whatever. On the Apple Watch, the Apple Watch has been around for a decade now, right? And they said
Yeah.
like something like I don't have the number in front of me, but I think it was like 50%. Like half of the people buying an Apple Watch were buying their first one. And I'm like, wow, I
Whoa.
see Apple Watches, everybody, so many people, and
Sure.
yet there's so many people new to the platform. And so if it's so back to Jason's article, if a product is mature enough and you can have both one version of it and another version of it to get more people interested, maybe there's some subset of the
Interesting.
population that a round Apple Watch would get them to come over. I still predict that Apple's not going to do it, but who knows? They could.
Yeah. Agreed. One of the last things you pointed to was a potential new Apple TV with I mean, I was blown away by this. A new chip, like an A17 chip. Like, do we need that in Apple
Hmm.
TV? And the question, I think, are you responded to this again? If we really would need it, if we want to support more of those AI tools being put into this as well.
Yeah, I have actually been thinking about this rumor this week, Brett, because please don't tell anybody, but I think I can safely say, okay, everyone listening to this is sworn to secrecy. My father's birthday's coming up. He does not listen to this podcast, believe me, but he needs another Apple TV. Okay. So me and my siblings are going to get him one. But we actually thought, Brett, like, should we wait to see if there's a new model? And I'm like, you know what? My
Oh,
dad is not going to know the difference
right,
between, this supposed new Apple TV is going to
right.
have a better processor so it can have Apple Intelligence. My dad is the last person in the world to want
He's
AI on his Apple TV. He just wants to watch, Netflix and Apple TV shows and Paramount and that sort of stuff. So but regardless, so I actually did purchase one. They always say don't buy an iPhone just before the new ones come out. Don't buy an Apple TV. So I actually, we did buy one this week that we'll be giving to him very soon. But for the rest
okay.
of you, if you're listening, nobody tell my dad. Don't spoil the secret. But but for other people, if you're thinking about an Apple TV, I would wait because the rumors, and especially this is one of them that was leaked in that leak we talked about a few minutes ago, that it looks like there's a new model number out there. So I'll be
Okay.
curious to see what Apple do. I mean, I've never considered my Apple TV box to be slow, but I guess it would be better to be faster. And if a better processor would enable some AI features, maybe you could have like a more intelligent discussion with your Apple TV. Like, I'm looking for a movie that's like a comedy,
Yeah.
but something in the last couple of years, and maybe with such, maybe it would do that sort of stuff to make recommendations. I'm just making that up. I have no idea what it would do with AI, but we'll see.
I like this little article from Tim Hardwick you linked to with the whole roundup of the different rumors on here.
The
And we
leaks,
talked a
not
little
just
bit.
rumors. This
Yeah,
is the leaks.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, the leaks. Oh yeah, that's right. This is like some of the things that they found and some of the numbering confirmed through code discoveries.
Hmm.
If I could have another life, I would like to be like a code discoverer. Like just go dig into all the code. I don't know how these guys and gals find time to do all of this, but thank you so much for your time in doing it because it gives us some additional fodder to talk about. And we just mentioned about the watch. Apple Watch and some of the things going on. But we have, again, you and I have been talking about this for at least 2 or 3 weeks about the watchOS 26, like the new watchOS coming out. So, regardless of what hardware we're going to get, I'm excited about the software that's going to run even on the older current, Apple Watches that people already have. This was a great article, I thought, that you linked to in Engadget from Amy Skorheim. Which she goes through, she's been testing out like the watchOS 26 preview, right? The beta
Hmm.
that she's been working on. And I love the fact that this was a little bit more practical. Like she's been using it in her daily life
Agreed.
and, excited about the wrist, the wrist flick that's coming out. I'm excited. I mean, she was going through talking a little bit about the workout buddy as well. She said it's more of a buddy, not a coach. So don't
Hmm.
set your expectations too high on that. But this was a great article.
Yeah, the Regency says buddy, not a coach, is because the workout buddy feature, she actually also has used the is it Samsung, whatever the alternative Apple Watches for
Oh
people that use
yeah,
the
yeah.
Android. And she says the Samsung one actually has a true coach in that it will sort of encourage you to do more and give you more intelligent suggestions of like how to push yourself to the next level. Whereas the workout buddy, it sort of relies upon you setting your own goals. This is the type of workout I enjoy doing. This is how long I want to go. And it's not so much that it's going to encourage you to do more, but it's going to report to you on how you did against what you told it
Okay.
you wanted to do
Okay.
and encourage you and reward you, say you did a great job. This was your best workout this week because of such and such. So it's just a different way. I mean, I still consider that coaching, but it's more of, good job, clap hands
Yeah,
and give you
she
information.
said she said it told her you did a great job after a 3 minute run. So, even after 3 minutes, it's like it's already saying great job. And it's like maybe that is, hey, for some people,
For
that could
some
be
people,
a great
there you go.
accomplishment. But it's
Yeah.
just, obviously she's a lot more, working out of somebody that does this a lot more. But it just, I thought that was funny. It's like great job after walking, several steps. But hey, that's a good thing too.
Yeah.
It's very
Like you
peppy,
said,
apparently.
she also is like the wrist flick feature. She says works really well, and she has a little video that was
Yeah.
sort of showing that off. I'm actually really looking forward to that.
Me
Another thing that
too.
she
Me
mentioned
too.
in here is smarter replies to text messaging.
Yeah.
And I tell you what, Brett, this is actually one I know I'll like because I don't know about you, but oftentimes I will be out and about or I'm doing something and my iPhone is maybe in my pocket or maybe somewhere else completely. And like I'll get a text message from someone like maybe you, for example, and like I want to respond to them, but like I'm not going to take the time to sit down and find a computer or my iPhone or whatever. I just want to
Sure.
do a
Yeah.
quick response. And I love my Apple Watch for that. Years ago, I used to love my
Agreed.
Apple Watch for notifications just to get the message. But really now, I like the notification plus the ability to respond. And so she
Yeah.
says that the newest version, it's more intelligent. It's not, AI, so to speak, but it's like machine learning that it gives you better responses. We've seen it in the past
Oh,
where if
nice.
somebody sends you a text and says, what do you want to have tonight? Do you want pizza or Chinese? It will understand, oh, the message gave you two choices. So I'm going to give you these two responses. One is pizza, one is Chinese. That
Right.
makes sense. But it's going to be even more intelligent at understanding what the person said and giving you suggested responses so that you can just look at your watch, see a list of 4 or 5 suggested responses and tap one and send it. I really like that. The number of times
Yep.
that I respond to a text right now with the word okay, I mean, often that's all you need to say, but it's because right there on my
Same.
watch, okay is a watch.
Right.
But if there were even
Right.
better options, that would just be more convenient for me. It would let me communicate with people and then get back to what I'm doing. So that's fun. So anyway, yeah, we've talked about some of the other new features like notes and stuff like that. Got just
Yeah.
the
The
other day,
Notes
Brett.
app. Yeah.
I was in the grocery store and my wife had sent me a shared note with the grocery list. And I'm like,
Right.
if I was running watchOS 26, I could actually see that on my
You could
watch.
have it.
But instead, I got to
Yeah.
take my iPhone out, look at it, put it back in my pocket, go find something. So anyway, so I'm looking forward to watchOS 26. I don't plan to get a new Apple Watch this year because I love my Series 10. And who knows what the next version will have. But I don't think I'll get new hardware, but I'm looking forward to getting new software.
Well, okay, so then I'll be the guinea pig on that one because I'm still running the Apple Watch Ultra 1.
I
I didn't
know.
even
Yeah.
upgrade to the 2, and my hope truly is that as I have loved this watch, this Ultra watch. It's been my favorite by far for many of the reasons we've talked about before. But I am so hoping they'll come out with an Ultra 3 or something along those lines, whatever that higher
That's what
end
they're
is.
saying. Yeah.
I am very, very excited about that. So I'll be happy to be taking the hit on that one as it comes out and running watchOS 26. Okay, let's not go away from the watch yet because, boy, this was a little bit of a bombshell, a bloody bombshell, if you will. Okay, it's not that bad. We have talked about this case that has been going on with Apple and Massimo. Massimo basically was successful in prohibiting Apple from utilizing the blood oxygen feature on Apple Watches. And I always get confused. I think it was available up to the Apple Watch 5 or something like that. And then there's like dates that are involved over the last several months that whether or not you purchased one before or after. Anyway, you can do a better job of explaining this, but it's it sounds like that some brainiac Macs at Apple have found a way to kind of get around this, and they've even gotten approval, I think, from the patent office, right? If I'm not mistaken, to say, yes, you can use or give access to, it's not really, it's a feature, or you can have like a blood oxygen summary or something along those lines, as long as you're using it with a phone. I just thought this was great, and it sounds like you've already been experimenting with it too, Jeff.
One of the things that I enjoy about being an appellate lawyer, Brett, is that because I handle appeals, it's all sorts of different things. So, there are some things like, tort cases, slip and falls, and personal injury cases. I've been dealing with those on and off for decades. But every once in a while, I will take a case to the Louisiana Supreme Court on an issue like wills and estates or trusts or something like that.
Right.
It's not my area of specialty, but you get really deep and you learn it. And I'm like, this is something new. One area of law that in my 30 plus years of practicing, I actually have never done is IP litigation, like patent litigation. And so
Okay.
when this whole Apple Watch story first came out, one of the first things that I learned is that there is a court called the U.S. International Trade Commission. I did not even know that. And although the word international this is not some international body like the World Court. This is a U.S. thing that it's a special court for when people have trade disputes for things coming into the United States. And so, as you said, years ago, Masimo, which is a company that makes all sorts of products in the medical field, they had a patent. They weren't selling a product on it yet, but they had a patent for
Yeah.
a device on your wrist that would check blood oxygen. And so when Apple came out with the Apple Watch, they sued them in this special court. And to a lot of people's surprise, because there were questions about the patent, they won. And so suddenly Apple could not import, and of course all Apple Watches are made outside the United States, they could not import into the US and sell a Apple Watch with the blood oxygen. So what Apple did is they didn't change the physical watch. They just turned off the blood oxygen feature if you're in the United
Yes.
States. And I remember, talking about my dad, I remember soon after this happened, my dad wanted a new Apple Watch and he actually wanted the blood oxygen feature. And so I couldn't buy him a new Apple Watch. I had to go and find like on Best Buy, somebody that still had it was in the inventory. They had bought it before the ban went into effect. And so we found one for him that was still had the feature enabled. But again, those days have gone on. Those have all flushed through the system. And so when this first came out, everybody, Brett, you and I talked about this on the podcast, everybody thought Apple is going to, they're going to try to win, but eventually they'll just settle, right? They've got so much money. And it has been such a surprise to me that for so long, what is it, over a year and a half now, Apple has not settled. They think they're right, and they are litigating this to the end. Plus, I saw John Gruber note this week that apparently the patent ends in 2028, which is not that far from now, I suppose. And so anyway, so for all this time, Apple has not settled. I'm like, what is this? And I mentioned my dad. I know there are people that do not buy a new Apple Watch. They don't upgrade because they don't want to give up the blood oxygen feature, which I understand.
That's my wife is in that boat. Exactly.
And the idea of giving up something you already have, even if you don't use it a lot, I understand that. I really do. So fast forward to yesterday. What happened yesterday is Apple announced that they have, and I'm surprised it's taken them this long, but they have developed a new feature that it still checks your blood oxygen. It measures it on the Apple Watch, just like before. But instead of analyzing the data and displaying the result on the watch, it takes the data from the watch, sends it to your iPhone. And if your iPhone's not nearby, it just holds on to the data. And the next time your iPhone's there, it sends it then.
Okay.
And then it displays in the health app in the watch the answer. So it's a little bit more cumbersome because, if you're using the watch to check your blood oxygen, it's more convenient to just see the number right there on the watch. But it does totally work. And Apple asked the court, the special court, would this violate the patent? And the court decided no. The patent apparently just has to do with processing things on the device. And so as a result, they said you could do this. And so Apple came out with a new version of the feature yesterday. It's a new version of iOS, and it's a new version of the Apple Watch. And so sure enough, last night I installed it, and for the first time since since last year, for me, I ran the test and it came out. And I was seeing as I look at my phone. So I did a test yesterday, Brett, and I got my blood oxygen results. And then I'm now looking at my health app on my iPhone.
Okay.
And I see that as recently as 7:16 this morning, actually, what time is it right now? It's not too long ago. It actually automatically checked my blood oxygen and
Oh,
sent the
really?
results
Okay.
to my iPhone. And I'm sure it did it during the night too while I was asleep. So anyway, the feature now works, whether you use your watch and manually go to the blood oxygen app and actually check it, or you're just wearing your watch and it just, happens to check it throughout the day. It will now populate that data onto your phone. Now, if you still have an old Apple Watch model, the
Hooray.
one that
Yeah,
had the feature, well, it's going to continue to work the same as
right.
always.
You're
And then, of
fine.
course, if Apple wins this lawsuit, or when the patent expires in a few years, I'm sure we'll go back to the old days of everything's happening on the watch. But for now, I think the feature, I don't really need this feature. I guess I have it again. But for people that it really makes a difference to, whether it's your wife, Brett, or somebody else,
Yes, yes.
now Apple's going to have new watches coming out, presumably in a few weeks, as we just discussed. And now they'll be able to advertise, oh yeah, this has a blood oxygen sensor on it. And there are some people that have probably put off buying a new Apple Watch that once they see this, they'll be, oh, regardless of the technical distinction and how it works, it could result in more sales for Apple. So I'm glad they found a way to do the workaround. I'm surprised it's taken this long, but
Absolutely.
I guess they had to make it and test it and get the court to approve it and everything else. But here we go.
My wife has been diagnosed with sleep apnea, or at least some aspect of it. She's gotten much
Hmm.
better with it now and doesn't even need the CPAP machine. But I know that that's one of the reasons she wanted to continue to
Sure,
check that. There's
sure.
other
Yeah.
better tests and stuff. Apple would be the first to tell you, like, don't rely on this. Instead of going through the other actual tests that you might need to go through. But she just likes to be able to gauge that every day and be able to see that.
Yeah.
And so she is still, I believe, she still does have an Apple Watch 5. That's the model, because that was one of the ones that was not affected by the ban. I thought that Gruber does a good job here of talking about it, from the technical aspect. He goes, what today's workaround does is process and display the blood oxygen sensor on your watch's paired iPhone rather than on the Apple Watch itself. You were just talking about that, Jeff, but I like that. It's like there's no processing of the sensor data on the actual watch and no display of the results on the watch. Now, again, my hope is that will change, but I'm so thrilled, and I just kind of like this little workaround here. Truly is what it is. It's like Apple says, well, oh yeah, like this is still important for our customers. We're going to try to put our minds together and come up with some way that we can still at least provide some of this information without without contradicting the issues and are going against the ruling of the court and everything. And I
Yeah.
just thought it was so great that they actually went to the court and got approval, because that's even stronger, right? The fact that they could do it without having anybody else to question, whether it's Massimo or anybody else.
One thing I particularly like about this too, if you're going to do something different, I think this way of doing it makes sense because, I mean, you just pointed out that the blood oxygen built into the watch is not going to be as accurate as like a more precise thing that you put on, was it on your
Right.
finger and stuff like that.
Some,
But
yeah,
the
exactly.
the thing that's always good about health data with the watch is that even if from a precision standpoint, it's not quite as perfect as a dedicated device, it does it in the background and it does it over time and it shows you trends. And, everyone will tell you that when it comes to any sort of health data or any sort of data at all, really, trends are so much more important than specific data points. And so
Yes,
the idea
exactly.
that like for now, the last couple of hours and for now on for weeks and months and years of time, I'm going to get these trends of blood oxygen, these trends of heartbeat, these trends of, everything else. That's where you actually start to see something insightful. You mentioned the sleep apnea issue. The Apple Watch, I mean, the Apple Watch has been able to measure sleep apnea for a little while now. And one of the
Right,
things
right.
that's really nice about it is that when it does these tests, it will measure your breathing. And is it the most precise thing? Of course not. But for whatever it is, when you have that over time, you can actually see, over months, how are my breathing disturbances doing? And so you can sort of see,
Right.
gosh, if I look at the last 6 months, I see that they're going up. I might need to do something. Or if I see they're going down, yay for me, I'm doing something
Yes.
good. And that's where it's the most important. And so that's why I'm really glad that this feature and so many more are there. Not that, another one is temperature. The new versions of the Apple Watch can take your
Exactly.
temperature, and Apple won't, that doesn't even want to tell you what the specific temperature is because it
You can't
knows
see it,
that
right?
it's not that accurate. But they do recognize that for trends, whether
Right.
you're, tracking your cycle, if you menstruate or other things, whether or not you're getting sick, as you look at things over time, it is accurate enough to give that good information. So anyway, so that's why, yes, it's a little bit less convenient to have to look at your phone, but what really matters is it can now run in the background, update your health app. Good job on Apple.
Can I just ask real quick because I didn't get a chance to update these like you did today, but you say it can do it automatically, and it looks like that Gruber is reporting you can manually initiate a
Yeah,
blood oxygen reading, right? Okay, so you can still do that.
yeah.
I assume
So I
there's
can
like
do
the
that.
app in. Okay, there's an app in the
It's
watch, and you
the
can
app has
go in.
always been there. Yeah, the app was there before,
Right,
the blood
right,
oxygen
right.
app. It's just if I was to tap on it before yesterday, it wouldn't work. But now if I tap on it and I say start, so here we go, and it's counting down from 15 seconds. And I
Okay.
keep in my, in 15 seconds, we will reveal the exciting result of whether or not I am alive or
Wait,
not.
are you so are you putting your finger on the digital crown like
No, no,
doing the
no. That's
EKG?
that's that's
Oh,
the
it's just
ECG feature. This
ECG.
is
Okay,
just you
because
stay
Gruber was talking
still.
about that.
I
Okay,
waited 15
okay.
seconds and it now tells me recording complete. So what's my answer? I don't know. Who knows? How am I doing? But now if
You
I
got to go
jump
to your
over,
phone.
I look at my phone and it says 98%, which as I understand it correctly, I think you want to be
Hey, bravo.
above
Yeah,
95, I think is what you want.
right.
So that's how you do it. I mean, you can manually do it, and then it's now updated my trends, my data on the phone. So you
Yes.
can do it
Okay.
manually, and that's great. And people want to do that sometimes. You just want to check your ECG, you just want to check your blood oxygen, your heart rate, whatever. But what's more valuable to me is that it's going to do it at random times whenever it does it in the background.
Bravo, Apple. I'm just glad. I'm glad that there's at least a what I hope is a temporary workaround, and then that
Mhm.
we will continue to have this capability built in and available to all. I just, the more sensors and the more trends that we can start tracking, Jeff. This is why I continue to be so enamored with the Apple Watch, like it. But let's go from the watch to a car for a little bit. Great little article here from Stephen Hackett. CarPlay's Messages app for iOS 26 is bad. I have to tell you, okay, do not text and drive, folks. This is not what we're we are supporting here. But in fact, I would say when I was reading this, Jeff, the only way that I interact with messages when I'm driving in CarPlay is when it pops up on the message. Typically, I've got the map up, right, and so it'll say, my wife has texted you, and so I tap on it, and I think it does a pretty good job of like reading the message to me, and then it says, "Do you want to reply or not?" And typically, I say no, or maybe I do, and dictate a message. I don't know that I've ever gone into the Messages app in CarPlay, actually. But now I know why, because like on Steven's graphic here, it looks horrible. Like I don't want to go into the Messages app. I don't really think that I would go into the Messages app, but I hope that Apple's going to improve this based on what Steven has written about here.
Yeah, and same for me. In fact, just this morning, Brett, when I was driving to work, I sent you a text to tell you I was on my way in and we could start
Oh
recording
yeah,
soon. But again, I did not look at my CarPlay screen for that. I just held down my button. I said, hey, who send a message. Actually, I didn't say the hey part because I held on the button. I just said, send a message to Brett, and I did so. But so there is a new interface in iOS 26 for CarPlay. It shows, I don't think that we have this right now in the Messages app. It will show, how in your Messages app you can pin the favorite people to the top of your
yes.
display or groups of people. And so it
Was
will
that
show that in
9? Yeah,
CarPlay.
333. Yeah,
But
yeah.
but what he doesn't like is that, first of all, there because it's 9 people, it's going long ways across your CarPlay screen as opposed to the optical. So like he's like somebody that I think of as being my lower left is no longer there. I don't know if
Yeah,
that's a valid
not
complaint.
there.
But what he also doesn't like is that the way it truncates the name so that if it's a really short name, like, Tim Cook or something, it'll display it. But if it's a longer name with more letters, it sort of it has some
Yeah.
of the name and then dot, dot, dot. Again, I don't know that that's a huge thing, but I will say this, that we are now close enough to the end of the beta cycle that for most things, Apple is getting close to being done of interface improvements. So I think it's legitimate for him to now say, hey, we're in mid-August and he doesn't still think this feature looks very good. I
Right.
agree with him on some of these, maybe not so much on other ones. But this is like as the last chance for Apple to do something about it, or they're not going to do it until, maybe later. But it was interesting to see what the new feature
Is
looks like because I actually had not seen any of these screenshots yet.
he is so detail oriented. He even says the messages label at the top is slightly off center. And I didn't even notice it until I actually saw his
Well,
little bullet
now that
point
he
down
said
here.
it, I can't not see
Now
it, but
you
that is
cannot
true. Yeah.
unsee that
So
now. Yeah, but that's good. I appreciate that, Steve. I always appreciate, people going in. But I mean, this theoretically should be a fairly easy fix there. But I mean, even again, just thinking about this, I now if I needed to text somebody that I don't know that I would go into the Messages app in CarPlay typically, Jeff. I mean, that is one of the places where she who shall not be named does work pretty good for me. And if I'm in the car, I will say,
Right.
text Jeff, and then I would dictate the message. I would never interact with the Messages app. I don't know, in CarPlay. I don't even know that it needs to be there so much, but I mean, I guess it does. So you can go back and see some of the history and things like that. But that is one of the areas where I do use Siri quite a bit. Is that if I want to listen to music, that's how I'll interact it when it's in CarPlay, or if I'm doing a message to somebody, or frankly, even making a phone call, I would say, "Hey, call mom," on speakerphone or something like that, and it'll work with that. But interesting stuff. On there. Let's say thank you to our sponsor, Lit Software. We've talked about them quite often. They have been around for as long as the iPad has been around because they make iPad apps. We are big fans of Trial Pad, Transcript Pad, Doc Review Pad, and now the brand new Timeline Pad. This is all a suite of apps that you can subscribe to. I got to tell you, I mentioned earlier, I'm at the International Legal Technology Association conference this week, and there have been a lot of people that I've even worked with in the past, helping to train some of the lawyers on utilizing these apps or integrating them into their practice. Typically, this is mostly for a lot of litigators, although you and I have talked about it. You don't have to necessarily be a litigator to understand and appreciate these apps. A lot of times, this is even great. The Timeline Pad is fantastic for building a chronology for whatever story that you might be telling. But I've also been talking to a lot of other folks that may not have used it, but they know a lot of their attorneys do have iPads, right? And they want to be able to know what are the best legal apps for those iPads. And you and I, Jeff, talk about this all the time. These are some of the best. Like there's a lot of note-taking apps. You have your email and communication apps, but making sure that you have the Lit software suite is very important, just about for any firm that is going to be using iPads and integrating them into their practice.
You mentioned you don't have to necessarily be a litigator to use it, although it's great if you are. I'll give you an example of that is, anytime you want to sort of show as a lawyer a document and then sort of emphasize one part of the document,
Yes,
the canonical way to do that is to have a call out, right? So you have the document.
that's right.
I mean, we see this all the time. TrialPad does such a fantastic job with callouts that I've had time, Brett. I suspect you know what I'm going to say because you've probably done it yourself.
Yep.
I'm not even using TrialPad for a case, but I'm putting together a slide for a presentation and I want to do a call out. You're showing it right there on the screen. And
Absolutely.
I will open up TrialPad, I will do a call out, and then I will just use that image, that screenshot, and I'll put that into my
Yep.
PowerPoint, my Keynote, whatever else, just because it does such a great job with that feature. And that's just one of the many, many things you can do with TrialPad. I love this software so much. So, so TrialPad is fantastic. All of them that you just talked about. Transcript Pad, I can't say enough good things about it. In fact, you mentioned earlier on today in the context of AI that, more and more people are having depositions where you also have a video of the deposition, and Transcript Pad for a while now has this feature where you can just take your video and sync it into the app. And I say put it in the app, it will use AI to actually sync the video to the words so that you can play back. I might be I'm scrolling through my transcript, just the words, right? But then I'll get to this one part of this really important question and answer, and you can make it so that it instantly plays the video of that question and answer. And sometimes sometimes it's just the words is enough, but sometimes when you see the way that the person is reacting as they say something,
body
that
language.
tells you body language is so important. And you're like, oh gosh, if I was just looking at the black and white words, I might say, oh, his answer is no. But then you look at the video and you see how the guy paused and then sort of looked around and then said, no. It's like, oh, that's such a different answer, right? And without
Very
the video,
powerful.
you wouldn't know that.
Yes.
And so Transcript Pad's great for that. One thing, we're talking today about a bunch of features for these apps, but one is that you can use Lit Suite yourself if you're a solo attorney. Definitely use it. But if you work for a larger organization, if you've got at least 10 people, you can get the enterprise program where you have multiple packages. And whether you use the enterprise program or just using it for yourself, you should know that Lit Suite fits perfectly with the apps that you are currently using. So
Yes.
I say, if you are a Microsoft shop, that's not an if. We know that every attorney, I know maybe there's a few people out there still using WordPerfect, but everyone uses Microsoft. We all use Microsoft Word and Outlook and everything else. But if you use Outlook, Word, Teams, etc., Lit Suite works great within that ecosystem. You can have the iPad, for those moments when the iPad is the best tool, and Lit Suite is right there. But you don't have to switch platforms. It works consistently with what you have now. I mean, Brett, that I use a Mac at home, but I use a PC at work. I've got all the Microsoft applications there. I've got my iPad right here next to me. I'm using Lit Suite here. Everything works together happily. Lit Suite exports things to PDF files. I just told you how I'm taking something, a call out from TrialPad, and I'm using that in PowerPoint. It all just works seamlessly together. Just really, really well. And so, if for some reason you were hesitating to get the software because you're like, oh, well, I don't use, I use PCs or I use Microsoft, that is totally fine. It, not just fine. I mean, Lit Suite knows that it works perfectly with it. And so, I cannot say enough good things about it.
The other last thing, just because I just talked to a law firm about this 2 days ago here at the conference, is there is an enterprise program. You kind of mentioned you can have it by, individually, but if you are in the market for 10 licenses or more, then you are eligible for the enterprise program. And the reason that that's so important, because a lot of the folks here at ILTACON are not lawyers specifically, but they're the IT professionals that support the lawyers, right? They're the ones that are providing the software. And so they are very interested in this enterprise program. And the questions that they always ask is, well, how can I take one license, from this individual and maybe allow another individual to use it? And that's exactly what the enterprise program is for. Lit Software does a great job of providing you a list of licenses that you can manage on the back end and you can assign to different individuals. And even not just individuals, Jeff, some firms will have 2 or 3 iPads that are maybe firm-owned iPads, right? They don't actually assigned to an individual. They're not a personal iPad. And you can even use some of those licenses from the enterprise program to put onto those firm-owned iPads as well, because sometimes people might just want to try it out, right? Or they don't want to use, sign in with their own iCloud account into those iPad. And so you can get some more information about that from Lit Software if you want to get some additional details, even though they do a great job of posting and answering a lot of questions here about, how do you pay? Can you use it with an MDM? And yes, you can pay. There's many options. You can use it with an MDM. It's very flexible, but you can send an email to hello@litsoftware.com, hello@litsoftware.com. Let them know that you heard about the enterprise program from Jeff and myself here on In the News. And if you do go through with enterprise program, you will get an additional license for free. So instead of the 10 licenses, you can get 11. So anyway, that's just a nice thing. We appreciate Lit Software, piggybacking on that for us. But it is great, and it is good to get some information. And I always tell people, even just get a trial of it or let Lit Software talk to you about it, show you around, because it's just good to be informed about this, right? Because inevitably, sometimes I find at some law firms, the lawyers will hear about this, or they may see somebody in a courtroom using it. And then they come back to you as the Lit Support professional, the IT professional, and they're like, hey, what is this app? I want to test it out. So it'd be good to get some information about that. Thank you, Lit Software. Let's do a quick in the show. We have I think I'm on the 3rd episode of The Foundation. What is season 3, right? Or no, 2. We're in, I think it's 3. I'm enjoying it. I don't have a lot of time to watch it, but I've been enjoying that. You've also been watching Chief of War, which I keep seeing the ads for that now because I'm watching The Foundation on Apple TV. And Platonic is another one that's coming out with the Seth Rogen. He was just in another series, wasn't he? He's all over the place Studio. On Apple TV, apparently. Yeah, The Studio. Thank you.
Yeah. And in fact, his co-star in Platonic, whose name is I'm blanking out on what her name is. She was on another show on Apple TV Plus too that took place in the 1980s. Called, I'm blanking out on all these names right now, but so these are 2 Apple TV Plus veterans. The Chief of War we mentioned last
Rose
week.
Byrne.
It is.
It's her name.
You, of course.
Yeah, Rose Byrne.
It is a legitimately good show. I mean, it's you can tell that Apple spent a ton of money on this because it looks beautiful. You know, it's one of these things like, you know, when there is a war scene taking place in, you know, ancient, you know, the 1800s, whatever it was in Hawaii.
Right, right.
You know, there are so many warriors on the screen, and I don't know if they're real people or computer generated, whatever it is, but you know, it looks beautiful. Not to mention the whole thing's filmed in Hawaii, so it's beautiful vistas and stuff like that. It's a beautiful show. It's an exciting show. I think it's probably my favorite thing that I've seen Jason Momoa in. I mean, I know that he's been popular for a lot of things. I watched one of the, you
Right.
talk about veterans, one of the very first shows on Apple TV Plus was a show called SEE, and it was a fictional
Yes.
world in which just everybody was blind except for one or two people. I enjoyed that show. I never actually watched the last season of it because it was good, but it didn't. I still think one of these days I may go back and finish it up. But it was okay. But Jason Momoa starred in that. He was
Okay.
actually he was very good in it. It's just the show itself, it was fine, but it wasn't my favorite show of all time. This one, however, this is really good. I'm really enjoying it.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
so
I want to see this. Yeah.
Ryan Christoffel of 9 to 5 Max says that, you know, Apple has a lot of, you know, acclaim for, you know, Ted Lasso and Severance and things like that. But he's saying that some of the best shows are on right now, you know, not only the one that you mentioned with Foundation, which is fantastic, but Chief of War. And then again, Platonic, he says he really likes Platonic. I think the season started last Friday. I haven't started it yet, but I definitely plan to do so maybe this weekend, because I really enjoyed the first season. You know, the premise of the show is two people that are not romantically involved, but they're just good friends, man and wife. You know, can you have, you know, a good, strong relationship of, you know, love in the platonic sense, not in the romantic sense, between two people that really care each other and you know, are best friends. And in fact, it was I think we maybe talked about last week. There was an article in the New York Times that it's a husband wife team that came up with the idea of the show. But it's really good and it's really funny. And I'm looking forward to the new season. And it's getting great. The point of Ryan's article is that it's been getting really good reviews. So, you know, Seth Rogen is one of those interesting actors that some people love him and some people, you know, don't like him as much because he has a very distinctive style to him, right?
Right.
But you know, you cannot deny that the studio was a fantastic show, and Platonic was a really good show too, and now a good season. So, you know, he has produced some
Oh,
really good
good.
work on Apple TV Plus. So anyway, that's some of the things that I'll be watching this weekend.
I'm just glad that Jason Momoa apparently filmed Chief of War while he still had a beard. I don't know if you saw this story, but I'm a big Dune fan. I love the first two Dune. If you remember, Jason Momoa was in the first Dune and he was clean shaven. And I just saw somehow I saw a headline or somewhere where he was just talking about that there's only one person, which is the director for Dune, like Villeneuve, I think, or he's like that's the only person he would actually shave for because they're doing a Dune 3 apparently coming up, and I just was interested in that story. Last but not least, I love this little blurb that you put down here. Talk about a long walk down memory lane here, Jeff. This is great. Bulletin Board Systems, BBS. Boy, this is like some of us. I didn't spend a whole lot of time on BBS. It's just the way that where I was living in my history. But I know a lot of folks did. Like you had your Commodore 64. This was a very cool little documentary. Just I only got to watch about the first 10 minutes of this, but just a very, very early days of the folks that were trying to communicate on computers. You know, we take this for granted so much today, but they were just experimenting and trying all kinds of different ways to be able to, like, I think one of the gentlemen talked about how you could put a message on a board, and then if you waited a couple of months, somebody else might put another message on the board. And it was just so exciting to be able to see people communicating this way, you know, as opposed to mail or something like this. So thanks for sharing this. This is the I forget the name of the documentary. I guess BBS the documentary is what it's called here. Just some really, really cool stuff.
And the reason we're talking about it is because of the news this week that America Online, AOL, is turning off its dial-up access.
Yes.
To which everybody reacted the same way. They
Screeeeech.
still have dial-up access? I mean, seriously?
Right.
But apparently, I mean,
Right.
AOL doesn't release the numbers, but there are some percentage of people that are still, they don't have broadband, they don't have anything. And so they're using a modem with the traditional modem sounds that we can all hear in our head to connect through AOL to get to the
Right.
internet. Boy, that's a slow way to communicate and to download stuff. But some people are still using it, but I guess not enough. And so AOL is turning its itself off next month. And so it did
Turning it
need, so
off.
there's an interesting, the article in the New York Times I linked to was interesting, talking about the service. There was an interesting article by Roman Loyola in Macworld where he talks about, way back in the 80s, there's actually a connection between Apple and AOL, because just to truncate it, there was originally a service called Quantum Computer Services that had one of the first online,
Yeah.
the BBSs were traditionally local, although you could dial up long distance, go to another one. But then you had some of these early nationwide, or I guess worldwide services, CompuServe and stuff like that. And one of them that I remember using in the 1980s was called Q-Link, and it was from Quantum Link. I think it was only for people that had a Commodore 64. But like you said, Brett, it was like, this whole idea of a message board, things that today, I guess Reddit is the current really iteration of this, or Discord. But back then, that was all new. And the idea that I could post a message and I could find somebody in a different part of the world that was also interested in the same topic and that they would respond, that was pretty interesting. That, and then Usenet groups afterwards. And so Roman describes that how Apple got together with Quantum Services because they wanted to have a system for Apple communications. And so they worked together with them on developing something. And then eventually Apple decided to get out of that business. And who knows what could have been. Of course, Apple did come out with eWorld in the 90s. That was its own thing. But when it sort of
Right.
went off, then the service that was Q-Link that Apple was no longer involved in, it sort of morphed into and changed its name to America Online. And then, as we all know, there was a time in the late 90s where, maybe even early 2000s where America Online was so huge. I mean, just that was so many people used AOL. So it's interesting that the service was still around in some limited form, and it did lead me to go back to think about modems and bulletin board systems and stuff. I was reminded that the documentary talks about how so many BBSs were just run by hobbyists, which would mean
Yeah,
that the BBS
exactly.
might be up, it might be down, and I did the same thing. I was when I started to use computers in the 80s, one of the really nice things that my parents did is they got a second phone line for the upstairs of the house so that
Wow.
I could have my, my computer could communicate over the phone, which is the only way to communicate with other people at the time, whenever I wanted. I wouldn't have to say, Mom, let me know when you're off the phone
Right.
because I want to use the computer. And she had no idea what that meant. So once I had my dedicated phone line, it meant that I could just leave my Commodore 64 on. And if I wasn't using it, somebody else could dial that number
That's
and
brilliant.
connect to the BBS that I was running, for a short time there. So anyway, it's just fun to sort of go back a memory lane, and so many things that were started in the 80s, of course, once the internet came out, that really made all this irrelevant. But so if you were, using computers in the 1980s, some of this BBS stuff may have memories for
Great
you.
video.
And if not,
Yeah.
then you may look at all of this stuff and think it is as bizarre as someone talking about the transition from horse and buggies to
Right.
automobiles, as you're like, oh
Right.
my goodness, this is so ancient. But I thought it was fun to walk down memory lane.
That's awesome. That's awesome. In the know.
In the
My
know.
tip today, I want to remind everybody about low power mode. And this came up for me in two instances, Jeff, both one on the Apple Watch and one on the phone. So a couple of weeks ago, I did a hike. It was a 20-mile hike called the Mammoth March, and did it with some friends, and it was fantastic. But I've done these before. And if I am using my Apple Watch to track my steps, because I get like about 30 something thousand steps that day, it'll peter out after maybe several hours, because it's constantly like I've got the All Trails app running. It's constantly like reading stuff. Like it is just
Sure,
in
sure.
the mode where it's running its battery down more significantly than if I'm just having a normal day. On the Apple Watch, you can turn on the low power mode. And I've gotten to the point where I do this now at the beginning of the march of the hike. So that way I know that it's going to last for the entire day. And it does. And it does great. Now, there's a couple of things that it doesn't do on the watch. Like I have to sometimes I have to tap it in order to wake it up. Or, it's not going to be as responsive when you go into low power mode as some of the times that if you're in normal mode. But for what I was doing when you're kind of doing that, I don't need that much information, and it does
Right.
all my tracking just fine, and that's been great. So I use low power mode on that, and you just go into the control center on the Apple Watch, and you can tap into the low power mode down there. I believe it's in the control center. Let me just to make sure that that's where I have it. I might have to go into the settings app to get into that. Oh, no,
Mhm.
we talked about this before. If you tap and hold, I think on the battery. Yeah, it goes. If we tap and hold in the control center on the battery percentage on your Apple Watch, you can see a low power mode button that's there
Oh yeah, I see it. Yeah.
in
Huh.
there. And that's good. The second area of use low power mode is on the iPhone. So as I've mentioned, I've been at a conference. Well, as you go through the conference, you're doing a lot of walking throughout and you're listening. And it's like I don't always have access to a place where I could charge my phone. And it just seems to run down a little bit more because I'm interacting with people or I'm checking my mail or I'm checking the app, for the next session that I'm going to go to, that kind of a thing. And so I've gotten to the point where I will turn on low power mode on my phone. Now, again, if you go, here's a support article from Apple that tells you, the 5G typically is turned off, except for video streaming. The auto lock defaults to 30 seconds. The display brightness is reduced. The display refresh rate is reduced. None of these things were a showstopper for me. It's not like I'm using the phone, in a normal way. It's just I want it to last throughout the entire day because usually you start early in the morning, you got receptions and everything at night. I just wanted to make sure that it was going to last that long. And once you turn it on, and I've got it now in the control center, so I have that little button in the control center. So I just swipe down on my phone and I tap low power mode, and then your battery icon turns yellow, by the way. A lot of people get confused to that because sometimes people will accidentally turn on low power mode and they're like, why is my battery yellow instead of white or green or something like
Yeah,
that? Well,
yeah.
that would be why. That's your low power mode that's turned on there. This will actually try to turn on automatically if your phone ever gets down to 20%. Usually you'll see a little message that pops up and says, do you want to turn on low power mode? But if you don't want to wait until 20%, I typically don't. I want it to last a little bit longer. Then I would just go in and manually turn that on. And again, I added that badge in my control center. The only thing that I found that I didn't like about low power mode on the iPhone is that your iCloud photos temporarily pauses the sync. So what I'm doing sometimes is I'm posting or I'm taking pictures of slides and I'm taking notes on an iPad or a computer, and I want that to sync those photos from my iPhone over to my computer. Well, I have to go in and manually say sync these in my iCloud photos because I'm on low power mode. It's not doing it automatically. But that's not a bad thing. Oh, and the last thing quickly, because I have a 15 Pro, my screen stays on all the time, right? And I like that. We've talked about that before. I can glance down on my phone right now. I see the time and I see if there's any messages or anything. But if you turn on low power mode, that does not happen. The screen goes black unless you tap it or you turn it on. And again, I was okay with that because I'm usually in a session. I don't need to see all of the information. But just so that you know, that's the couple of things that's happened with low power mode. And I know there's all kinds of things you can do. Some people say that it helps your battery life, from overall, like, it keeps your battery lasting longer. I don't really care about that. I just want it to last throughout the day. When I know that I've got something all day long that I'm not going to have access to power, then I just go in and I tap on low power mode. And even with some of these concessions here, I don't feel like that it's that bad. I don't do it all the time, but in these couple of situations, I just wanted to remind people about the low power mode for the Apple Watch and the iPhone.
My daughter often lives in low power mode for her iPhone, which
Oh
is
my
just
goodness.
interesting. I mean, I guess it's because she's got an older phone and the battery, and she has, no opportunity to charge it during the day easily. I almost
Right.
never use low power mode on my iPhone, and I almost never intentionally trigger it on my Apple Watch, but I do use it. And the times that I use it is, as you mentioned earlier, if your device gets to a certain level. I think on the Apple Watch, it's either 10% or 20%, but like I
Mm-hmm.
will sometimes have days where I'm using my Apple Watch more extensively than other days. Maybe I'm out and about using the cellular feature because my iPhone's not near me.
Right.
I'm doing workouts that always puts a lot of strain on it. And so there will be times where it is near the end of the day, at night, and my Apple Watch dips below that number, and it will tell me, do you
Mm-hmm.
want to put on low power mode? And I'm like, yeah, because I'm not going to be doing anything intensive with the Apple Watch for the next hour or two, but I do want it to last until, I get into my bedroom and I can charge it up a little bit before I go to sleep because I tend to
Right.
wear my Apple Watch when I sleep. And so it's very helpful for me when that comes on because it's going to, like you say, it's just going
It
to eke a little
reminds
bit
you.
more power. So that's when I use the feature. I like it. Good suggestion. My tip of the week this week is an app that I reviewed this
Oh
week
yeah.
on the phone called Cassette. And
Cassette.
I'm mentioning it today. It's for I want to mention it for a different reason than the reason I wrote about it. When I wrote the review
Okay.
this week, first of all, it's always nice to have like a brand new iPhone app, come out that's interesting because it seems like the iPhone's been around. We don't always see new things, but this is a nice new app. And as a reminder, if you didn't see my review, this is an app. It's from a developer in New Zealand, Devin Davies, I believe his name is, and he had this app
Okay.
called Cassette. And the thing that jumps out at you, and the thing that I harped on in the review is nostalgia. We're talking a lot about nostalgia today, Brett. AOL and
I see
BBSs and stuff
this.
like that. And so
Yeah.
that the look of this app has the look of an old VHS or VHS-C cassette tape, which we used to use for home movies. And
Yeah.
so it allows you to show videos that are in your camera roll, but it does so it has like what is like an imaginary cassette tape of the year, 1998 or whatever. And then like you tap on that and it puts it, it has an animation where it puts it into the VCR and plays the video. So it's just
Oh,
sort of cute the
cool.
way it displays it. But what I want to focus on today is not the nostalgia, but the usefulness of the app, because you may say, can't I just open up my Photos app and tap on the tab for videos and then see all the videos that are in my camera roll and watch them that way? And you can, but when you do that, there's a couple, I mean, one of the main things, and apparently the main reason that this app was developed is that somebody had the idea of, he's like, I don't like the fact that I'm in the Photos app and I play a video, and first I need to manually pick the video and find it and then play it. And then when it's done, it just stops. He's like, what I want to do is go from one video to the next one, to the next
Right.
one, to the next one. And he's like, what this reminds me of was the old days where you watched home movies. Somebody would put that VHS cassette tape into their video camera and they might record a few minutes of someone's birthday. And then the next thing that
And
you
then
have, it's a few minutes of
right.
Halloween, and then it's Thanksgiving, and then it's Christmas. And we would just continue to record those same things on the cassette tape. And so when you watched them, you would just have the serendipity of going from one event to another one to another one. And so they said, wouldn't it be fun if we could have an iPhone and iPad app that will play a video? Because sometimes the videos we record are just little, snippets of just like somebody blowing out the candles, and then automatically go to the next
Right.
video and the next video in time. And so that's what this, so even if you forget the fact that it has this very fun, nostalgic interface, that is an interesting functional feature, whether you want to look at it on your phone or on your iPad, or you can also Apple Play this to Apple, not Apple, when you share it to your TV. So you can have your Apple
Airplay.
TV,
Yeah.
thank you, AirPlay. You can AirPlay it to your Apple TV. If you just want to have some videos go one after another on your Apple TV, you can do that. And then, so that's one useful feature of this app. And then
Oh,
another
that's
feature
so
that I
cool.
like is, I love in the Photos app, the memories feature. I brag about all the time.
Hmm.
It's like one of the best things Apple's ever created. I love the idea of the serendipityness of it. It just shows me something that I didn't even know I want to see, whether it's a photo or a
Right.
video. I love that. And this app taps into that too, because when you first open up the app, there is a big button on it that just basically asks if you want to go into, what is the actual button? I'm opening the app right now. It says at the very bottom, take me somewhere. And I just
Take
hit
me somewhere.
I
Yeah.
just hit take me somewhere, and I see right now it has randomly chosen the year 2027. And here is, oh, well, look at this. I'm looking at a video of my son when we had a beach vacation in 2027, and he is talking to the camera. And then when this video is over, it'll go and play the next one. And in fact, if I want to manually do it, how like on a TikTok or Instagram or anything, you just sort of swipe up and you just go to the next one. And I'm doing the same thing on my
Sure.
phone. So I'm swiping
Oh,
and
nice.
so
Okay.
now I'm looking at this, and now I'm looking at this one, and now I'm looking at this one. And it's just sort of going in order as I swipe. Now I'm in
Oh, that's so
September, and now I'm
cool.
going on into October. And so it's just it's a nice way. So yes, it's a fun app. Yes, it will bring back memories of VHS cassette tapes to the extent that you're old enough to have memories of that. But even if that doesn't matter to you, if you take videos and you just want a new way to experience them, this is a cool app. And the thing is, most of the features I've talked about are
Nice.
free. If you pay, and I encourage you to pay because we should encourage this developer. If you pay like $8, which I instantly
Yeah.
did,
7.99. You
it
said.
gives
Yep.
you the ability to actually go and select a specific one. Like, oh gosh, I want to, you can scroll through your years, and I'm looking at the year 2007, and I want to scroll through, and it's got them organized by month, and like, oh yeah, June of 2007, we had that family vacation, and I want to start playing that one, and then go next, and then go next. You have to pay for it to get access to that feature. But if you just want the play me a random cool video, I don't think you have to pay for that. Just download the app and do it. So I really encourage, if you take videos with your iPhone or your iPad, I really encourage you to download this app and check it out. And if you want to encourage the developer and get access to all the features, pay the $8. It's worth it. Very cool app.
That's so cool. Very cool. Nostalgia from Mad Men. Was that that's the scene that you were going to link to?
So
And
that, yeah,
John,
when in the Mad Men show, which is just one of the all-time best shows, there was that scene where Don Draper is doing a pitch to Kodak for the carousel,
yes,
and
for
the
the
people
carousel,
at
right?
Kodak, they come into the ad agency and they say, "Oh, we have the circle. We want to advertise the circle." And Don Draper's like, "No, no, no, it's not a
No,
circle. It's a
no,
carousel. It's going to take you through your memories of life." And it's just one of those all-time best scenes that you can watch. I
good
loved
show.
watching it again on YouTube.
Yeah,
And I'm like, oh,
yeah.
this was just Mad Men at its greatest. I love that scene. Oh, I love that scene.
So Devin Davies is the new Don Draper. I like it. It's good. Putting that in. I'm going to download this today. This looks so cool, Jeff. I appreciate you sharing that. And you got a great review on here, by the way, and I'll make sure that we put that in the show notes as well. All right, more speculation and anticipation next week. As always, as we get ready for Apple to somehow make some kind of announcement. Thanks as always, Jeff. We'll talk with you next week.
Thanks, Brett. Bye-bye, everybody.